It's wild when you think about it, right? How one single event can knock over another, and then another, in this kind of relentless chain reaction. Well, that's exactly what happened in the Middle East during and after the Cold War. Today, we're going to trace that incredible domino effect and see how superpower rivalries and regional power plays lit a series of fuses that are still burning today.
Okay, so here's our roadmap. We're starting with the big picture, the Cold War chessboard. Then, we'll see how the '67 war completely flipped the board. From there, Iran's revolution just shatters the whole game, which leads directly to a brutal, devastating war. And finally, you'll see how the fallout from that war sets the stage for Desert Storm. Each piece connects, one to the next.
All right, first up, the superpower chessboard. You got to understand, after World War II, the Middle East became one of the main arenas for the competition between the US and the Soviet Union. This wasn't a side game, it was a high-stakes battle for influence, with oil, ideology, and military hardware as the main pieces.
And pretty quickly, the whole region basically split into two camps. You had the US backing monarchies like Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, and, this is a crucial one, the Shah's Iran. On the other side, the Soviets were arming and propping up nationalist Arab republics like Egypt, Syria, and Iraq. So you can see how any little local spark, any border dispute, could suddenly become this massive global fire.
And that brings us to our first huge domino to fall, the 1967 Six-Day War. Now, this was way more than just another regional fight. This was an event that completely and permanently changed the balance of power in the Middle East. A real game changer.
The whole thing escalated incredibly fast. In May of '67, Egypt's leader, Gamal Abdel Nasser, boots out UN peacekeepers, blockades a critical Israeli shipping route, and starts moving his army to the border, with Syria and Jordan joining in. For Israel, this looked like an existential threat. They didn't wait to find out what would happen. On June 5th, they launched a massive, preemptive air assault that basically wiped out the entire Egyptian Air Force before it ever got off the ground.
The result was just stunning. In less than a week, Israel seized the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza from Egypt, the Golan Heights from Syria, and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, from Jordan. They tripled the amount of territory they controlled. And this, right here, is the moment that creates the single most defining issue in the region, the military occupation of Palestinian territories. It's the beginning of the conflict over land and peace that continues to this very day.
Okay, so the next domino tips over 12 years later in 1979. The region had kind of settled into this tense new reality after the '67 war, but then an ideological earthquake just shattered everything. We're talking about the Iranian Revolution. And this didn't just change a country, it flipped the whole chessboard upside down.
See, the Shah of Iran was America's guy in the Gulf. He was the cornerstone of U.S. policy. But his government was basically rotting from the inside. You had years of brutal repression, massive inequality, even with all the oil money, and this growing feeling that the Shah was just a puppet for the United States. It all boiled over into this unstoppable wave of popular rage.
And the man who rode that wave to power was Ayatollah Khomeini. He brought with them this powerful new ideology. And when he called the U.S. the Great Satan, he wasn't just being poetic. He was fundamentally redefining his country in direct opposition to American influence. Suddenly, there's this new, revolutionary force in the Middle East challenging everyone, the US, the Soviets, and all the conservative Arab kingdoms.
And that revolution had an immediate, violent, and bloody consequence. Right next door, Iraq's dictator Saddam Hussein was watching all this chaos unfold. And he didn't see a threat to his own power. No. He saw a golden opportunity.
Saddam invaded in 1980 thinking it would be a cakewalk. He was wrong. Dead wrong. The Iranians, fueled by this incredible revolutionary passion, fought back with everything they had. The war quickly devolved into this horrific 8-year-long stalemate. I mean, we're talking World War I-style trench warfare and these infamous human wave attacks from Iran. Just absolutely brutal. And the cost. I mean, just look at these numbers. They are absolutely staggering. Maybe 1 million people dead between the two sides, 1 million more wounded, over $1 trillion in damage. The war just fizzled out in 1988 with no clear winner, but it left Iraq with a gigantic, battle-hardened army, huge debts, and a massive chip on its shoulder. And that brings us to our final domino. So what do you do when you're broke, you have a massive army, and you feel like you just defended the Arab world and nobody's thanking you for it? Well, if you're Saddam Hussein, you turn your attention to your tiny, incredibly wealthy neighbor, Kuwait.
Saddam needed an excuse, of course, so he came up with a few.
He accused Kuwait of slant drilling, which is basically like sticking a straw under the border to suck out Iraqi oil. He also claimed they were driving down oil prices on purpose and demanded they forgive the billions in loans they gave him to fight Iran. It was all a pretext. In August 1990, he invaded. The world's reaction this time was immediate and huge, because Saddam's invasion threatened the global oil supply, and that got everyone's attention. The United States, now the world's only superpower, put together this unprecedented coalition, 34 countries, to kick Iraq out of Kuwait.
And militarily, Operation Desert Storm was a spectacular success. Kuwait was freed in a ground war that lasted just 100 hours. But, and this is a huge but, the aftermath was incredibly messy. Saddam was left in power, crippling sanctions were put on Iraq, and most importantly, the U.S. set up permanent military bases in Saudi Arabia, the home of Islam's holiest sites. And that decision planted the seeds for the next round of conflict.
And that leads us to the final critical question, because that decision, to station American troops on what many Muslims considered sacred soil, became the #1 rallying cry for a fairly unknown guy at the time named Osama bin Laden. It directly fueled the rise of al-Qaeda. So this so-called victory in 1991, it wasn't the end of the story. It was just knocking over the next domino in a chain that would lead us straight into the conflicts of the 21st century.